what would be success for him and some of the shifts and changes that he's making. People are in an uproar because they're being changed. People are having their contracts not extended. They're not being offered new contracts. And man, it's amazing to hear all of the stuff that's being said. My wife and I have been in heated discussions because she is a lifelong educator. And we've been in heated discussions for the last 3 days. And I'm not going to tell you what she told me the day before I left, but I'll just say I think we're on the same page. So, Superintendent Miles, you were at DISD, and then you became the superintendent and founder of Third Future Schools. You've been there for 6 years. But there are those who have said you were run out of DISD, the Dallas Independent School District. The school district was doing better, and then when you got there, it was doing worse, and you brought the same formula here. Talk to us about what happened at DISD, and is your approach in the Houston Independent School District the same approach you took in DISD?
Yeah, we could talk all day about that, but let me give you the short version.
Okay.
So when you think about, is a superintendent successful in a district? I mean, that's the same question we ask about principals or teachers.
Sure.
So what's the metric? What is the measurement? Mm-hmm. And the measurement, at least a big part of it, is achievement results. And so if you can look anywhere in real research and see that the achievement of Dallas Independent School District rose when I was there and continued to rise after I was there. And if people want to really look at how well it did in the research, you can look at a couple things. Commit has a lot of data. You just go online and Google Commit ! They're an organization that looks at data and success of the districts in the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area, but also now across the state in many ways. You can look at other data from the district at the time, but most of all, you can look at this report, National Bureau of Economic Research report from March 2022. Look that up, real research, and it will show you the achievement. But more than that, there are two things that I put in place that have lasted, and I think most people will say was a success. One was the pay for performance plan in Dallas. That's still there. And if it was so bad, and I've heard people say, well, it's bad, it's going to ruin education. No superintendent has tried to get rid of it. No board has tried to get rid of it.
Pay for performance.
Pay for performance, and that caused
and
some consternation.
Educate us on what that actually is.
Yeah, so that's paying teacher for their effectiveness versus years of experience and college credit.
Gotcha.
It's the most successful pay for performance system in the nation. Washington D.C. also has one. They might argue that theirs is more successful, but we're 5 times as large as D.C. And now the Texas initiative, this is TIA, Teacher Incentive Allotment for Texas, is also largely based on the Dallas pay for performance system. In other words, they took parts of it and made it statewide, giving more money to teachers who are effective in getting achievement results. That's a statewide initiative passed by the legislature. The other program that's gone statewide is ACE, Accelerating Campus Excellence. That was a program to move the most effective teachers to the lowest performing schools. And so that program now is also supported by the state and is now statewide. In other words, there are many, many districts using that model, and it's still called ACE. ACE. And so those two programs, which I started, I wrote the concept paper for, and we passed, and we started it in Dallas, are still ongoing, and if you look at Dallas's results today, if you go to the administration there, they will tell you that not all of their success, but some of their success still leans on those two programs and many other things that we did. We right-sized the budget, et cetera. Let me answer the second part. HISD and its connection to Dallas and the reforms. So in Dallas, we did some pretty dramatic reforms, and they were successful. HISD were doing whole-scale systemic reform. So it's like Dallas reform, but several more all at once. So whole-scale systemic reform is comprehensive, far-reaching reforms in one section of the system, the HISD schools system, all at once. And so there's way more, the more changes as a result of this whole school systemic reform. So HISD is going to be much further along than Dallas at the end of the day, but it's going to take a lot more work and a lot more communication and a lot more understanding in order for this to work.
All right, I'm going to come back to that whole scale systemic reform in just a moment. The other elephant in the room that I'd like for you to address, and you've already put forth a statement regarding this, people have implied some kind of impropriety. They've kind of left it out there for people to connect the dots. That allegedly occurred because the charter you founded, Third Future Charter Schools, allegedly their Texas branch sent money to the Colorado group, and you were responsible for diverting money out of the state of Texas to Colorado, and allegedly you're still a consultant for the schools now. I think the number I heard was $40,000 a year you're getting. Can you speak to that? Is that true? Is that accurate? What is the take on that?
Yeah, the true part is I'm still consulting with Third Future Schools an hour every weekend. That's what I do because they needed a transition period because I was involved in everything, including grant writing and overseeing the whole shebang as they were growing. So that's true. What's not true and kind of crazy is that what the author of the report described was what all charter schools do. It's the way it's supposed to work. And it's confusing. So, this one reporter actually took advantage of the confusion to make it seem like it's, illegal, which it is not. So just shorthand version is this. When you have a network that spans more than one state, and Third Future Schools is in Texas, Colorado, and now Louisiana, and soon to be in other places, just like, IDEA or KIP or any of those other charter networks, there's a central office. The district, like Midland or Ector County or Austin, the three places where Third Future Schools had schools, they have a contract with Third Future Schools. They send the money to Third Future Schools as a pass-through, and then Third Future Schools pays the teachers at Ector, at Midland and Austin. They pay for the books and the programs, the curriculum. That's how it works. It's set up in law like that, so it's nothing unusual. So to say that millions of dollars went to Colorado, well, yeah, kind of it did, because then it goes back out to the teachers and the programs and the curriculum and all of that.
Gotcha. Well, I will say this for our listening audience. I did confirm, I didn't even talk to the superintendent about this last time we met, but I confirmed that KIP has done the same thing. Other networks that have schools in multiple places, they send the money in, they distribute the money out, and there's nothing illegal or nefarious about that.
Correct.
And so, that for me is enough about that. Attorney Cofield, do you have anything you need to add? You want to cross-examine the witness?
Oh, well, with regards to the legality of that, no, that's one of those things with time. I am learning to stay in my lane. One question I guess two questions that I have for you. So with regard to Dallas, so was that an appointment like this? Did this come from TEA as well? How did you get to Dallas and then have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, so Dallas was not an appointment. Dallas was a regular interview process. So there were several finalists or candidates at the end. And so I interviewed with everybody else. We were separate interviews, but I interviewed at the same time as everybody else and was selected by the board.
And then quickly, with age, 35, it started to take more to get me off the couch. And so I'm curious for you, when the opportunity, however it came about to come to Houston HISD, you knew you were going to be doing a big change. What was that process? Because I think some people might feel as though there's more nefariousness or some sort of malicious, you're just like, I'm not gonna come in and tear stuff up like my dad kind of alluded to. What did that look like, knowing that what you're walking into?
Yeah, that process, I don't know all the other candidates. I know I was one of many that applied for the job, and in the end of the day was selected by Mike Morath and his team. So it was an appointment versus a board of elected board choosing a superintendent. So that part is true. I don't know if that should seem nefarious or not. It's a state intervention.
Yeah.
But on my end, though, I think the real question is, why did I agree to? Why did I agree to do this? But I've been through the fire, and I have had success in Dallas. I have the background. I'm a lot older now, so I have the patience and the grace giving that comes with age, because I understand the concerns that people will have. I understand change management, and so I thought all of my past experience put me in the right place or right conditions to do well here and to help. It's not. I knew it wasn't going to be an easy job. I like I said, I've been through the fire before, so I thought I could come in and help really move the district along, and that's what I intend to do.
Last question in regards to Dallas and Houston. You talked before about, as a teacher, you didn't necessarily start off as a great teacher, but you grew as a teacher. Do you think you're a better superintendent now at HISD than you were at Dallas? Do you think you've grown in your leadership and those kinds of things in perspective?
Yeah, no question. Dallas was a great learning opportunity, and I learned a lot. And one of the things I tell the principals and the executive directors is that with regard to leadership, you should always be learning. And I'm still learning here. I'm 67 years old. I'm still learning how to be the best leader that I can be. And that means that there's going to be mistakes, but that means you have to learn from them. And in Dallas, made several mistakes, learned from that. Luckily, it didn't. We were still able to help the district grow. And I think in Houston it'll be the same way.
Yeah. Let's talk about the NES. I've heard people criticizing you, and they were asked the question, "What is NES?" And they're like, "I don't know what it is." And he doesn't know either. Right? What is the new education system? You describe it, and I'm quoting now. You describe it as an innovative staffing model that puts the focus on classroom instruction and improves student outcomes. What is the NES model, and how do you see NES changing the culture of education at HISD, and in particular with the schools that are NES schools?
Yeah, it's hard to describe in just a minute, but let me give you the short version again. But I got to give context to really understand NES. So the biggest problem in American public education over the last 20, 30 years is that in large urban districts, we do piecemeal incremental reform. And that has not worked. That means doing even a bold thing, but just one thing at a time. And invariably, that one thing that people try to change gets pulled back by status quo bias, but also because that one thing is part of a larger system. You can't just change one thing. Let's take, for example, let's say you want to change teacher compensation to pay for performance. That is one big thing. But you can't just change that. You got to change how you evaluate teachers, and you have to change how you provide professional development. You have to change the recruitment process. You have to change some policies. You have to change how you talk about leadership development. You have to talk about aligned curriculum. I mean, all of those things intersect. You can't just change the pay, or you just can't change the evaluation without affecting all those other things. But that's been the history of our profession. And they don't even, we as a profession, we don't even do the big bold things because, that always gets people riled up.
Oh yeah.
So, so what to do? Can't keep doing the same things, guys, right? I mean, if we really want to make a difference for kids, we cannot keep doing the same things. So I think that the solution is whole-scale systemic reform, which means tackle a lot of the reform elements in a systemic way, comprehensively, for a subset of the schools all at once. So NES is more about that than any particular thing. So let me just mention the 4 or 5 big things. I mean, there's several, but the big things are, one, there's a unique instructional model. Teachers will understand that direct instruction is important, as is differentiated instruction. And it's hard to do direct instruction in many places without some differentiation. It's hard to do differentiation without direct instruction. This model combines the best of both instructional models.
Okay.
That's number one. Number 2 is staffing. So we add learning coaches and teacher apprentices. In 130, think about this, in 130 HISD schools next year, which will be NES, there will not be a need for substitutes. There'll be less transition, less turnover, because if a teacher has to go out on maternity leave or they resign, you have teacher apprentices that the kids already know. The teacher apprentices know the model. They can step right in. This year, 85 schools, no substitutes, no need for it.
Really?
So that's a huge difference in how we staff schools. A third thing is that in these NES schools, we add what we call experiences and perspective. And we do that through a couple ways, actually 3. One, we have what we call the dyad, which is we add martial arts or dance or photography or spin or spin bike or piano, so that kids this is over and above the elective. And the purpose of this is to grow a kid's experience and perspective. We also send the 8th graders who meet the attendance requirement. We're sending them to Japan.
Oh, wow.
And as we next not this week coming, but the week after that, we have some kids going to Japan, and then we have 7th graders going to DC. So travel is one of the big parts of the program. And then the third way we grow perspective is through our Art of Thinking course. It's a required course, 90 minutes, three times a week next year for 130 schools, and that covers critical thinking, information literacy, and problem solving. So that, and then I guess the last big thing is pay. A lot higher salaries in this model, and we use what we call the hospital model compensation plan. Now, keep in mind this: 130 schools next year, and by the way, teachers deserve higher pay.
Right.
They do.
Right.
And we talk about that in the profession all the time, and then we don't really do much about it. Well, we're doing it in Houston. So 130 schools next year, 5,100 teachers in the NES orbit. Elementary teachers' average salary will be about $82,000. Middle school teachers about $84,000 average salary. High school teachers about $86,000 to $87,000 average salary. That's a huge $15,000 to $20,000 jump for most teachers in this district in the NES side. Now, in the non-NES side, we raise salaries by $2,500 for every teacher, even during these tough financial times. So I think that should be, we should applaud that increase in salaries. And we're going to grow the non-NES salaries over time, but already half the teachers are making way more money than anybody else in the area. So that's just some of the things that are different about NES.
Tell you what, let's take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment. One of the questions that came to me online was whether or not you and one of your goals is to bring more charter schools in HISD or to start a voucher program. I know, the governor has been very, very big on trying to push that through. It hasn't gotten through primarily because of rural Republicans who don't want to see it happen. what is your take on charters? And because you've run charters, you've started the charter network and the voucher system, how do you weigh in on those things?
You want me to answer right now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have one charge, and that is to help 274 schools be the best, provide the best education possible for their students, and to get them ready for the year 2035 workplace and world. That's it. That's the only charge. So we've not started any charter schools. I'm not opposed to charter schools, but we haven't started any, and we don't plan to in the foreseeable future. I'm not going to rule it out totally, but let's try to improve our schools. Let's compete with KIPP, with Yes Prep. Let's bring our schools up to speed, and we'll be fine. So when it comes to choice, I've always been agnostic. You can look at my record. In Harrison, we started the Harrison School District in Colorado Springs, my first superintendency. We started the first charter program for that district, a very successful one. We started a homeschool collaborative, meaning we had 137 parents who wanted to homeschool their kids, but they needed help, so we worked with them. I've always been agnostic. You know, I started a charter network. Every school should be a good school for the kids in that school.
Yeah.
And that's my bottom line. But here in Houston, this is an intervention. We're trying to turn it back over to an elected board as soon as possible. The charge was take the 274 schools, make them as good as possible, get out of DNF status. So that's what I'm doing, and there's evidence of what I'm doing. Right?
So before...
Let's take a break. We'll come right back, and we're going to talk about how you found the district, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
People are talking about HISD is a B-rated district. Why did this, TEA have to come in and take over? We were on the right track, especially because House Bill 1842 was triggered by one school, Phyllis Wheatley, and all of those things are out there. We're going to talk about that when we come back. You're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. .com. So when we left, we were talking to the superintendent about schools, and there's been a lot of talk, Superintendent, I know you've heard it. HISD had turned it around after COVID. TEA didn't need to come in. Our district is B-rated. And actually was wrong for TEA to come in when there was only one failing school that triggered House Bill 1842. You call it, and you said HISD is the tale of two districts. I want you to explain to our audience, what did you walk into? Is one failing school? Are all of the schools doing great? And I know individuals are listening, well, my school is doing, what's the record say? And we're talking about testing, we're talking about student outcomes. Was there one failing school in HISD? What did you walk into when you came into this job last year?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question and allowing me to speak to it, because I can imagine, being, if I was a parent or community member here before the intervention, that it's very confusing because we do have some of the best schools in the nation. That's a fact.
Sure.
And so you see the reports in the news. I saw one 3 weeks ago where some of our schools indeed are in the top 100 in the nation, high schools and other schools, and so the experience in some parts of the community is like, wow, we've got some great schools, and that's true. But I wish people would just kind of look at the data, not only the data, but go and see some of the schools, especially in the underserved areas. And you would see that, if you look at the data and you just look at what's going on in the schools, over time, the achievement has gone down. And we do have an achievement gap. And HISD's overall proficiency. So despite the fact that we have some of the best schools in the nation, you have to look at some of the scores of the other schools. And so our proficiency on the whole is lower than the proficiency of other large urbans, which is lower than the proficiency of the United States average. And those are facts.
How many schools, when you walked in, and I don't know if you were aware of this when you applied, but was the only school that was failing Phyllis Wheatley?
No. So
how many schools are performing at a level that we should not be excited about?
Well, 123 have DNFs, and then you have to look closely.
Wait a minute, hold on, Superintendent. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. You just said 123 schools in HISD are D or F rated.
Correct.
So if we pull out the DeBakey's, HSPVAs, those premier high schools and their feeder patterns, some of them are Vanguard schools, so they don't necessarily have feeder patterns.
Right.
But if you pull out those premier schools, what would our district be rated? We wouldn't be a B district.
Well, even today, we're not a B-rated district. I don't know, because I'm not at TEA to do all their calculations, but with 123 D and F schools, so I can explain the B rating in a minute, but with 123 D and F schools, I'd be surprised if we weren't C minus or D plus. But I look at the proficiency rate levels more than the TEA ratings.
Okay.
Now, to be fair or to be accurate, our charge is no school with multiple years of D or F status. So that's the exit criteria. There's 3 pieces, but that's the achievement part. So, there was some confusion, and it was unfair to Wheatley High School to focus the attention on them. Because when I heard that, I started looking at the data, and I could see the feeder schools into Wheatley. And, Wheatley's done much better this year. Been there a couple times. Also been to McReynolds and Key, and I've been to the schools that feed into it. If you look at McReynolds Middle School data a year ago, right at the end of before the intervention, you would see that the proficiency level is way low for reading and math. I think the 8th grade proficiency level is in the 20s, and so
you say 20%.
20%
of the students.
Yeah, and that was last year, a year ago. They're going to do much better this year. But the point is, if their low middle schools are feeding into Wheatley, you want to solve Wheatley, you just can't say, well, we're going to fix Wheatley. That doesn't make any sense, because you got the 8th graders going to be in the 9th grade, so you got the problem all over again.
Right.
So, I think sometimes people are HISD proud, and that's great, and I'm HISD proud now too, it's because I'm here, and this is I'm invested in this district and the community. But you also have to face the brutal facts if we're gonna do right by the kids.
So 123 schools.
Correct.
D or F rating.
Yes.
So where do we get this B rating from?
So it's a long story. I'll give you a short version.
Okay.
Real quick. So in the 21-22 school year,
In the middle of COVID.
In the middle of COVID, the district, we didn't take the STAR exam in the
End of
2021 school year. We took it in the 21-22 school year.
Okay.
The scores plummeted.
And that was across the board.
Plummeted. Yeah, and that was everywhere, and that made a certain amount of sense, right? I mean, because kids weren't coming to school as often, and we didn't get all the kids back. You know, it was they lost a year, you know, kind of. So scores plummeted. 22-23 school year, the scores grow, not back to where they were, but they grow fast also. Just deep dive and then steep climb. So everybody grew. And if you use domain two, you know, that's growth.
Right.
You get credit for growth. The district got credit for all the schools growing. And so the B was really an inflated metric at the time. I mean, it made sense. Okay. You got credit for growth, but you know, that doesn't mean you're really at a B.
Sure. Yeah.
You see what I mean? So, and then we get back to the regular year, right? The 23, the 22-23, so back it up a year. Then you see that we fell back down.
So the B was in relationship to how far we had gone down.
Yes. Thank you.
No, I just want to make sure.
That's a clear way of what I said. I went through all that for nothing.
No. So the question is, was it a real B, I guess, in terms of...
No.
And if it was a real B, it wasn't a real B for the 123.
That's correct.
DNF schools.
And also, remember, I said, look at the proficiency.
I'm going to say that's the growth side.
You know, and you have to do both. So let's celebrate growth, yes.
Domain two.
And at some point, kids got to be able to read.
Right.
Not just grow in the reading. They have to be able to read.
Yeah.
You know.
So you are the first superintendent that I've heard say publicly in the 30 years that I've been here. I got here at the tail end of Dr. Rod Page's term, and then he was on his way out and then went to D.C. But you're the first superintendent that I've heard state publicly that one of your goals is to have the students of HISD reading on grade level. Mm-hmm. Now, you said that, and then there was a big uproar about you shutting down libraries and repurposing libraries, and people talking about you turned them into detention centers and you know, cells and mini prisons and whatever have you. I argue that the issue wasn't about libraries, it's about literacy, right? I want to hear your explanation about libraries. Why did you feel that move? Because you had to think that move, you know, my son said, you had to know that move was going to cause an uproar, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How talk about your strategy behind that and what has been the outcomes of making that decision.
Yeah, and let me just say, by way of preamble, that for libraries and other programs that we've had to cut or change, it's totally understandable that people really appreciate their librarians, love their librarians. Mm-hmm. I love libraries. This is. I know that it may seem staged or anything, but when I got here, I have in my bag that I carry around. People see me with my black bag, 2 library cards. And if you were to go out to the car right now and get my black bag, there'd be 2 library cards that I need to clean out my bag, of course. But one is Pikes Peak Library District and the other is Douglas County Library. These are both in Colorado. And I have the cards because I use the libraries and, and I, as a kid, I went to libraries. So nothing bad about libraries, but we're in a different place when you need to improve reading. So real quick, I don't want to promote somebody else's podcast on your show, but I wish people would listen to Sold a Story, which is a podcast about the reading wars. And the debate is whole language and, give kids a lot of books and they'll learn to read versus phonics and the science of reading. And people fought over these things and were just as angry when someone said, no, we need phonics, not just, bean bags and lots of books surrounding a kid in a nook, or in a corner of the room. And, if we'd only give them books that they were interested in, they'd learn to read. And if only the teacher read exciting things that they could connect with, kids would read. And those battles are over. The science of reading won. And so libraries are great for kids who can read, but they're not as great for kids who can't read. A kid who can't read needs someone who teaches them reading using the science of reading. And then they will appreciate the library. And, I hear all these people and kids and come to the public board meeting, and they're arguing for their libraries, and they that's a place to do it too, to advocate for libraries. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think everybody who came arguing for a library could read.
They can read for sure.
So I understand the sentiment, but please understand that we have a whole bunch of kids who need, rather than a library, a science of reading teacher. So we expanded science of reading. We expanded the curriculum materials around the science of reading. We're training teachers on the science of reading. And so those resources we need to get them from somewhere. We can't just add, expenditures. And so that's why we don't have the librarians in the NES orbit. Now, the non-NES they have control over their salaries or their staff and their budgets, so they can have a librarian if they want.
It's just so interesting. Obviously,
let me take a short minute to give a station ID. You're listening to KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. We are your community station. We've actually gotten approval to go longer. The superintendent has consented to stay with us a few more minutes, and so we're going to continue this discussion. But I want to thank you for listening to KTSU.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that's just interesting, right? Nobody wants to see HISD or anybody parading a bunch of kids like, hey, give me all the kids that don't know how to read. I'm going to put them on TV and be like, hey, this is how bad it is, right? Mm-hmm. But it's almost as if that's what people need to see that there's really an issue. But there's nobody advocating on that side of it. That said, the library's piece, real interesting. I know the decision was made. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but it's where we are. It's what we're doing. At least I have context to it. One of the concerns that I have, though, is, I understand the approach of going with a true, kind of a full-scale exchange, a change to really get lasting change. Mm-hmm. We also know that our political climate is something, and thinking about dollars, because it sounds like you need time to execute the plan, right? It's almost like a rebuild for the Astros. It was some bad years there, but obviously we had some championship years there. I'm wondering, what does that look like for budget if it changes considerably? Because I understand we have a big $450 million deficit. What do these things look like? I know it's kind of a two-part question, but one, if we continue to have struggles or changes with funding, can your plan still be executed over the next few years, assuming that the plan needs some time to really go?
And let me say this before you answer that. I want to make sure, as we close the loop on the last statement and question, I want to make sure everybody heard what you're saying, that those cuts in the NES schools, those funds were diverted to teaching and developing strategies to help teach children how to read, right? Because I know the expectation is we want our kids to read to learn, but many of the kids can't read to learn because they haven't learned how to read.
That's right.
So if I want to make sure everybody was clear on that, because some people are making some comments online, you diverted those funds to help teach children how to read.
Yes, and some other things that maybe
right. Okay.
We have so let me answer the question, because we actually have a $520 million not deficit but gap from this current year's budget that we're nearing the end to, and next year. So we had to make that up, and the reason why it's so large is the COVID relief money was used to to help the district avoid cutting expenditures when the enrollment decline and when they increase expenditures in central office. In other words, for the last almost 5 years, the district has not received new state money, right? The state allocation has not increased. So it's been flat. So if you don't get new money and your enrollment drops, you have to cut expenditures. And if you give a salary increase, and they did 2 years ago, 9% for teachers, which is good. Teachers need that. At the same time, if you give a salary increase, you have to cut expenditures. You can't just give salary increases if no new money is coming in.
So what happened to the 1.2 billion COVID relief money that came?
Well, there you go. Yes, it was $1.2 billion over 3.5 years, COVID relief money. We call that ESSER. And that money paid for the enrollment decline and the salary increases. The problem is that was one-time money.
Yeah.
So the wraparound specialists, the librarian, the growth in librarians, the growth in wraparound specialists, all was enabled by ESSER money. The district had $1.2 billion more. But they were warned against putting it into one-time expenditures because when the money stops, which it stops this summer,
right.
Now what do? You can't take away the 9% raise, but that's a 9% every year, right? Going forward, you have to pay for the kids to not come back. So the enrollment loss of 20,000, 25,000 now we're going to have to pay for. So we are the second most important thing this administration did. I'll just say it out loud here. Is we right-sized the budget. We are not going to go off the fiscal cliff as the last administration predicted, because they knew this day was coming, because they put the money in the ESSER and they knew that was one-time money. But we right-sized the budget, and that means we cut a whole bunch of central office personnel. That was really tough. It's really tough to fire anybody or to let people go, not mid-year, but at the end of this year. And we cut a lot of purchase services, about $60 million of contracts and purchase services. So we have right-sized. We're going to be over an $800 million fund balance, which is where we need to be, instead of the 550 and then the 250 the following year that the last administration predicted. So NES does cost, yes, and we're paying for NES because it's an increase in expenditures by cutting central office positions and purchase services.
So, I mean, for me, what I'm hearing, and I guess I'm almost a test subject because I have a 3.5, almost 4-year-old. So as a parent that's making that decision where to put my child, right? And I have plenty of obviously peers that are in that same space. What I'm hearing is, because enrollment's down, it's putting a strain financially, and partly because of other decisions, but on the district. Enrollment will continue to go down as long as people feel like the district is not performing up to snuff, right? Everybody wants their kid to go to the best place they can go for their future. So it's almost like you have this short window to correct things to make sure enough people like myself put my kid in HISD to keep enrollment up. And so I'm just wondering how you're balancing that, because it's almost like I need time to get my thing off the ground because they're going to be good, but I also need you to get your kid here and believe.
Yeah, you're thinking exactly the way we're thinking about it. It's a very nuanced thought process here. Meaning this, the largest decrease in enrollment was in the NES schools. I don't mean this year, I'm talking about over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
The schools we identified as underserved, more kids left the underserved schools than they did the high-performing schools. So my guess is over the next several years, we're still not going to lose a lot of kids from our A and B schools.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think the enrollment will decline even further if we do not improve them. So, people leave the schools if their achievement is not there and if the discipline is not there, if they're out of control. And when you look at our middle schools, we got about 10, 11,000 kids in 5th grade and 10, 11,000 kids in 4th grade in this district. And then you go to 6th grade and it drops down to 9,000 kids.
Oh, I believe it.
And then 9,000 in 7th grade, 9,000 in 8th grade. And then it jumps back up in 9th grade. That tells me that we haven't done right by the middle school because of performance, and then also discipline. And parents are smart; they get it.
Yeah.
They understand that every parent wants their school to be a good school.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now some people don't have means to drive their kids anywhere or to live, to move into a high zone area, a high performing school zone. And so it's our obligation to improve all the schools, especially underserved schools, and that's what we're trying to do.
So there have been many reports that teacher morale is low. Teachers and administrators are unhappy, don't feel supported, have not gotten professional development and support to make NES successful. People are reporting that teachers are leaving HISD at record numbers, and you are being forced to hire uncertified and unqualified teachers. What do you say about that? What are the facts regarding teachers and teachers leaving and teachers applying and NES teachers and administrators and the like?
Yeah, I think I have a different view because I've been in a lot of schools, and I talk to the principals all the time. And we're looking at the human resources HR data. So let me tell you what I see so far. Now, we're not done with the year, and people may resign at the end of the year. But right now, at last count, even though we moved out, not this, we told a lot of people that at the end of the year they won't be coming back. We did that. The administration, the principals.
You didn't offer them a new contract.
Correct.
For next year.
Right. So they're still here. I mean, they weren't walked out or anything, but they won't be coming back. Even with that, even with the number of teachers that we told were not coming back, at this point in time, we only have about 700 vacancies. And so, and that's, most of that are the people who we told will not come back. Now, the schools are not seeing the mass exodus has been predicted for 5 times. Now, let's see what happens on June 6th, which is the end of the school year. There'll be a bump up, and we'll see just how much. But I think, so I don't see that. We have the actual numbers, and we're hiring. We see a lot of people at the job fairs.
But is 700 a lot or a little?
Oh,
so
thanks for asking. Yeah, because I made the same mistake. I criticize other people over that. When they mention 700, they don't tell me how many teachers. So there's 11,000 teachers.
Okay.
So, and those are, when I say vacancies, that means principals are looking at the people who are not coming back as a vacancy that they have to fill. So it's not like there's not a teacher in that spot. I don't know how many actual vacancies there are right now where there's no teacher hired for a position. But I know.
Is that normal in terms of a normal school year, 10%, 15% attrition rate in terms of who leaves and who doesn't come back and who's not offered a new contract?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think the data I can give you on that is every year in this district, well before me, the last several years, it's been about 21-22% turnover. So that out of 11,000 teachers, you're talking about what, 2,400, over 2,000 teachers leave anyway, without anything going on, a massive change or something like that.
Sure.
And so that's always the case. When I got here last year, this is also a fact. The day I got here, there were 800 teacher vacancies that were not filled. Even then. So, and it probably grew a couple hundred more over the summer. So we had to fill about 1,000 people. I also know that we had 0 vacancies at the start of the year. And the real question now is, can we, since we're being more rigorous in who we ask back, can we fill those vacancies with qualified people? And can we get to 0 vacancies at the start of the year with qualified people? We are trying to ensure that everybody has a certification, but keep in mind, there are some teachers who can teach well without a certification. Look at Teach for America. And I know that has mixed reviews from some people, but among education professionals, Teach for America has a good reputation. I think they're a good organization. They have teachers that can teach well. Not everybody, of course. They have thousands of Teach for America applicants too. But so there are people who can teach. Yes, Prep, KIP, all those folks have teachers who, some of whom do not have certifications that teach very well.
And they usually work towards, so at least I understand, like Teach for America, right? You might start off uncertified, and one of the mandates typically within a certain period of time, you're working towards certification, or is it the idea, because again, you have so many people that don't know, and so many young parents with like they're anxious. You're like, so wait, we have a bunch of just random people just in the classroom. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean beyond just like this the term certified?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And grace to people that may not know the certification process or teacher prep programs and things like that. I get it, and when they hear the word uncertified, it's like, what? I wouldn't let a doctor operate on me, right? And I get that. The question is, what is the correlation between certification and effective teaching? And the research is pretty clear about that. And not that we're going to go out and look for uncertified people. We don't. We're looking for certified teachers. But the research is the first couple of years, certification usually is better than a person who doesn't have a certification. Mm-hmm. But after about 3 or 4 years, it doesn't make a difference. It's about effectiveness and how effective the teacher is. So having said that, I want people to be clear so there's no misinformation out there. We are looking for certified teachers. We think we're going to be fine. We'll be able to find them. And then there are several positions where you cannot waive the certification: special education, bilingual, and pre-K. So at least pre-K in the early pre-K 3, pre-K 4. So we are if we have a shortage at all, it's in those areas right now. We think we're going to be able to find them over the summer.
So let me ask you this, and if there's something specific that you cannot share, of course, you have an obligation to share it. A lot of controversy, a lot of protests around teachers and principals being quote unquote laid off, not coming back. Some claim that individuals were not notified, they weren't given prior warning or explanation. Big lightning rod. Former principal of the year is let go. What is the tool by which you evaluate teachers and principals and you make this decision? How does anybody who may have been a teacher of the year in the last 5 years, now end up not being offered a contract to come back? How are you evaluating this around rigor and around what you want to see happen, especially in these NES schools, but in all of the schools?
Yeah, once again, I have a lot of sympathy and understanding of people who see teacher of the year or principal of the year and then see all of a sudden that they may be removed or not asked back. That is totally confusing to people.
Sure.
And the big difference, though, is that, and I'm not going to talk about any one person or teacher, but I think people should keep in mind that the last administration and every other district has a way of evaluating people. Sometimes it's based on data, sometimes it's just subjective. And in fact, in most cases, it's subjective. Mm-hmm. And it's about likability. And people like their principals, and they should like their principals. Yeah. It's the face they see.
Sure.
They don't. Most of them don't know anything about the data behind it. And that's, it's not the parent's job to know about the data behind a principal. What a parent sees or a student sees is, does that principal greet me at the door, or it says hi to me, or, does the principal, is available, is at the basketball games, and those things like that. And same with the teacher. And so that's important. So don't get me wrong. We need principals to do that. We need teachers to do that. And, so not or, but and we need teachers and principals to be able to get achievement results, improve instruction, and lead. And so what we're doing now is something that most people are not used to. Teachers are not used to it, principals are not used to it, and community's not used to it, and that is using data pretty effectively and rigorously. Now, let's just take principals for a moment. Since the summer, we've talked about what does it look like to be an effective principal. I mean, there are PowerPoints with that title on it.
So you've done the professional development
all year long.
Okay.
I mean, all year long. I mean, you guys know, because I sometimes get beat up for, well, there's too many spot observations, there's too many instructional visits, and there's, you're focused on the NWA data. I mean, all year long we've been hearing about, well, there's, we've been hearing about the things we've been doing, which is looking closely at instruction, providing feedback every day almost, right? Yeah. And that's been a point of contention. So there should be, at least among the principals, we can talk about teachers later, but among the principals, there's no question that we've been looking at your data. We've had these, what we call the IRT visits, these independent review teams, because the principal can't grade himself. We've been looking at their spot observation, the feedback they give to teachers. The executive directors have been in every school a couple times a week, at least. We've been looking at their achievement data, the beginning of the year, middle of the year. Remember, we published that. We looked at their leadership. They've gotten scores on leadership. So that's a lot of data and a lot of training.
And these scores are not secretive. I mean,
the principals know. I mean,
they know.
We want to be careful not to put that out in the public.
Right.
Because, you deserve to have your evaluation, be yours instead of somebody else. And I've trained the principals every month, all year, myself. The professional development, Sandy Massey, Chief Sandy Massey and her team have trained principals every month. And also, executive directors have been trained every week, the first semester, and every other week, the second semester. And so there's been a lot of training, and always, at least one part of that, it's not administrivia, the training is about instruction. And so there's no question what we're looking at. The lead evaluation, this evaluation system is published, and we're following it. And so it's pretty clear. Now, to be fair to everybody, including principals, this is the first time they've probably been, assessed rigorously. And we don't have a full year evaluation, so that's also, some point of confusion. But up to this point, we've had lots of data. And so, grace that they may still be, confused is not the right word, but still lacking some clarity about how rigorous this is.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because I read an article where you reportedly said that for the first time the district was looking at data and principals are analyzing not just anecdotal information, but are also looking at all sorts of data in the evaluation of teachers and the evaluation of schools. And I took that to mean that principals are not just looking at, is this a nice person? Do I like the teacher? Do the kids like the teacher? Are they, nice people? But actually looking at student outcomes, and that they haven't been analyzing the data as rigorously as they should and making decisions based on that.
Yeah, that's right. And look, most overwhelming majority of teachers want to do well. They're doing the job, but they may not be able to teach as well, right? I mean, we used to. What bothers me in the society sometimes, they say, those who can't do teach. It's like, that really undermines the profession.
Those who can do it and those who can't teach.
Yeah, and it's like, are you kidding me? You try teaching.
Yeah.
And see if you can raise outcomes. It isn't easy. It's a profession, it's an art, and it's a science, and we got to honor that. At the same time, then we've got to say, guys, not everybody can teach.
Yeah.
Let's prove those other people wrong. Like, just because anybody can go into teaching. No, that's not true.
Right.
Yeah,
This is a profession. Don't tell me anybody can
Yeah,
go into
you see the billboards. They say, if you want to teach, call, this number. Like, I got you. You're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. For those of you who are listening and wondering what's going on, we have an extended version of Real World Real Talk, and we have in the studio for us, or with us, I should say, Superintendent Mike Miles of the Houston Independent School District. He has graciously consented to give us a little more time, and so we're about to wrap this up, but we certainly appreciate him coming. Just a couple of more questions, and B, you have a question for him.
Yeah, one thing that I've always been curious about is what do we want out of our kids, right? And obviously there's all these different testing, and people, I think I started off with TOS and TAX and STAR and all this other jazz. Like, I've always been curious, is the idea that we want every kid to be able to attend a 4-year college, or every kid, is it simple to be like a productive citizen? And so with that in mind, where do we want the kids to be academically? I think I heard, and it might just be as simple as like reading on grade level, which makes sense, but apparently that's something we're not doing, or haven't done successfully yet. So where do we want, what expectation do we have for our kids, and then what would make it a successful year for you? I know you said it's going to be a little rocky before it gets smooth.
Yeah, thanks for asking such great questions. I'll give you the short version to the answer to the question. What we want for kids is yes, reading, writing, math, science. You've got to be proficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the world is changing quickly.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you're going to hear more and more about the skills gap. And so we have to give our kids the skills to be competitive. And we need to give them year 2035 competencies. What are those? Those are information literacy, problem solving, learning how to learn, working in teams, facility with AI, other skills that are not taught in schools these days. So it's not just kids who want to go to college. Yes, if you want to go to college, let's help, let's do that. But if you want a skill and you don't want to go to college, we need better career tech ed programs. And we need better, we call it in state terminology, CCMR, College Career Military Readiness programs. So we need to do all of that. And so it's not just reading, writing, math, and science. There's definitely a gap, and you need to be able to read, even in the year 2035. You'll be at a much better place, and you have way more options if you can read. So let's get our kids to read and do math and science, and then let's think about all the other things that they need to do. And so that's the mission.
So what's the win when we get to the end of this year? I think most of us would agree that let's move out of the emotions, let's move out of the personal attacks. If you have 123 out of 276 schools that are D or F rated, even if those children increase their reading level by 2 grade levels in 1 year, which would be phenomenal growth, they probably are not at a place where they can pass the STAR and get you across the finish line in terms of domain 1.
Right.
What is your goal? What would be the definition of success for you in terms of moving the needle with the 85 NES schools and the district as a whole?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So even though it takes a long time to turn a big ship, the success for this administration this year is to have the majority of the 85 NES schools move up a level. So if they were F to D, D to C, because in the end of the day, that's the exit criteria. And even though, we just started, and the first part of the year is just foundation setting and all that. I think the community deserves to be a little impatient, and it's going to expect that the NES program that I said is going to works right away, and so I think it will too, and so we'll see. But the focus will be on those NES schools, I'm sure, and so we expect that most of them will improve, and we won't be assessed this way, but we put in the good foundation to build on that. So right-sizing the budget, working on other systems, improving the choice program, for example, improving the quality of instruction, alignment, getting a higher principal capacity, growing the principal capacity. All those things are important. They're kind of unseen though, for now, but they all go to helping us get achievement. Next year is going to be an even better year.
I'm going to ask this question as the last question. So we're celebrating this past week the passage of Brown versus the Board of Education. One of the things that you're on record as saying is you're coming in, you have discovered the historical disparities in the Houston Independent School District between funding and programs of schools east of Main Street versus those west of Main Street. And the majority of the schools, 123 DNF rated schools, are in Black and brown communities. What is your thought? Because one of the things you talked about, and you just alluded to it, that it's more than just STEM, right? It's AI, it's other aspects of STEM, and making those programs more accessible and available in those communities that have not had access to those programs in the past. What are some of the things that you have seen and witnessed, and what are some of the things that you are doing and or will do to address some of those disparities? Because there are those of us, I think back to the late Jerry Monroe, Larry McKenzie. There are others of us who have been fighting to get equity from the district, trying to stave off the TEA intervention / takeover. I mean, there are those of us who have been fighting. This is not a new fight, right? We've been fighting for years and could never get the school board to come together on behalf of those schools east of Main Street, to recognize that a rising tide raises all the boats. Let's help all of our children get to where they need to be. What are some of those disparities, and what are you doing to address those?
Yeah, another long question, but I'll give you the short version again. I mean, these are great questions, and
you got as much time as you need to answer
on that, right? But let me just say this: separate is not equal, and equal is not necessarily equitable. And so, in fact, this system of two systems tried to be equal in its distribution of resources, which just reinforce or maintain any inequities that existed. Yeah. So how are we addressing that? So I want to be clear though. We're not going to rob Peter to pay Paul. We got some of the best schools in the nation. We need to keep them the best schools in the nation. We need to allow them to work. But how do we address the rest? So I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll answer the question directly about what we're doing. So last Saturday, I went up to Dallas to look at their Career Tech Ed North Center. It's a Career Tech Ed center where 9 high schools send some kids to get special programming. And I'd gone through, I visited our HISD's Barbara Jordan Career Tech Ed Center last summer. And I remember walking through it and saying, this is good, but where's the and? We had auto shop, wood shop, cosmetology. We did have health science there, but it was mostly, CPR and working on the circulatory system and things like that. Nothing really, special. My daughter's a paramedic, so she went through EMT and paramedic. So I kind of know a little bit about what young people should be learning. In any case, I left there thinking, great that they have all these things for kids, but where's the robotics? Where's the space engineering? Where's the graphic design? Where are those, working with AI? Where are those augmented reality classes? Where's those flight simulators? All of these things, I thought, and we have some high schools with those 3D printers and, not just making buttons, but making robotic arms with the 3D printer. And so it showed me, grave inequity. That's it. Yes, and guys, yes, and let's not. It's good what they have, but let's get them ready for year 2035. So when you go up to the Dallas Career Tech Ed Center, they're state of the art. They do have flight simulators. They have hospital, the health science program with mannequins that can talk to the person and say, I'm feeling pain, my leg hurts, or they just have all these different symptoms that kids have it squirts blood. You can take blood pressure. I mean, it's all, and they have so much AI, artificial intelligence assisted. They have augmented reality machines. It just they can weld without welding. They have a augmented reality where you weld as if it's real, and then so you practice, and then you get to the welding device. So it's phenomenal to see, but it just made me sad, and it's like more urgent. Our kids need this. Come on, and that's not right.
Right.
So that's what I mean by some examples of inequity. So what are we doing about it? Well, we are investing in NES. We got to get them to read write. We're giving them more perspective, more experiences. We're going to help them with travel. We're growing the CTE program in all the high schools. We have 4 programs of study. We're starting next year at all high schools at the district cost. Networking, logistics, health sciences, and there's one more. Anyway, I'll think of it in a minute, but we're adding that. We're adding AI elective.
Entrepreneurship.
So, what's that?
Entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship, thank you. Matthew Giles, special assistant. Entrepreneurship is another one. We're adding in all the high schools who don't have similar programs. We're also adding an elective called AI in the workplace for all juniors and seniors. It's an elective, so it's voluntary. But my point is, we're not going to wait to help our kids get a year 2035 workplace skills, and we are investing heavily in the NES program by cutting central office staff and cutting purchase services, not cutting our other schools. And that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah. I think, I know for many people in the community, when we saw the CATE programs cut, the old vocational programs cut, and there were many people who have made a great living in those programs, coming out of those programs, there was nothing put in place to replace it, right? So if you didn't go to college, because I've been here long enough to see the pendulum swing, right? And I know you have as well, educationally, where it was like vocational education, good, college is okay, then it swung all the way to the other side. College is good, vocational education is bad, and so now we have more doctors than we have plumbers, and we don't have electricians, we don't have people who are learning how to work with their hands, let alone AI and other things like that. And I love the fact that you're saying it's both and.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
That people can have a viable post-secondary educational experience, can get certifications, and it doesn't require them to go to college. And
that's right. My
son and I talked about this on numerous occasions. Who's doing better, the person who's making $100,000 a year, who has $200,000 in school loans, or the person that's making $80,000 a year with no school loans.
Yeah.
Right. And so I appreciate you taking that perspective. Let me take this opportunity to thank you for coming in and sharing with us, providing clarity. There are some people who were looking for information and they got more information. There are some people who were mad at you before this interview. They're still going to be mad at you. They may be mad at me as well. But at the end of the day, there's no need in us arguing anymore about whether it's an intervention or a takeover, the Houston Independent School District, I'll say this, you haven't, prior to you coming, has failed our black and brown kids. And so the challenge now is, how do we move the needle? And I'm hoping that the NES is successful, not because I am a fan of Mike Miles, but because I care about these kids. And I've gone to jail and gone to court with too many kids. I've buried too many HISD students who were put out of schools and not given a viable alternative. And so I'm hoping that at the end of this year, we can see the needle move in the right direction instead of the wrong direction. That we'll stop talking about us being a B-rated school district, or stop talking about inflated grades that were the result of Domain 2 coming out of COVID, but we're actually talking about real numbers. And we remember 123 schools, y'all, D or F rated in the district, 123, and they are in black and brown communities. Nobody black or brown should ever be talking about our district is B rated. Nobody of color should ever say that when the schools in our communities are running at a D and F level. So we got to make some changes. Superintendent Miles, I'm going to say this again, and we can talk about parents. Teachers blame the parents, parents blame the teachers, and the one who suffers the most are the children. That's who ends up suffering. So I want to thank you, and I want to extend to you an invitation publicly. Anytime you have anything that you're rolling out, anything that is coming down the pipeline with HISD, you have an open invitation. Come to Real Talk and share with our listening audience what's going on.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the great questions. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the community.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thank you so much. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it, and I add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And the fight for our children is a fight that you want to get involved in. B, before we close out, what are some thoughts regarding just what we heard tonight? A lot of people, I think, if they're honest, right? Because at the end of the day, there's some people who are going to be listening. They're like, okay, well, that's Mike Miles' perspective.
Yeah.
Well, man, 123 D and F schools, man, that's not Mike Miles' perspective. That's TEA, and we need to make sure that we are holding our elected officials accountable. We know we have a board that has been put in place. We know we have a superintendent that's been put in place. But I think for me, what I leave this conversation thinking is, man, we got to do something different.
Yeah, at least try something.
Man, we know historically, this district has failed black and brown children from the passage of Brown versus the Board of Education, 1961, 62, when the district was taken to court and the judge ruled that, HISD needs to implement the principles of Brown versus the Board of Education and to make haste slowly, which makes no sense, right? We're going to make haste slowly. Justice Warren said, with all deliberate speed. Judge in Harris County says, we're going to make haste slowly, right? And some would say it is so slow it still hasn't happened. What are some of your thoughts? You think about it from your generational perspective. You're a parent now. Your kids are getting ready. I say kids. I'm being prophetic.
Right.
But little man is getting ready to go to school. What are your thoughts now as we talk about this?
I think it's interesting. I'm glad that the listening audience had an opportunity. I felt like we were kind of just happened to have a superintendent over for dinner or something. To have an honest conversation. It's one thing, to give someone a chance to speak, and it's another to just kind of spout whatever you think is true. Right. And so I do hope that, if I could, I guess I would have given a disclaimer from the beginning. Like, if you're looking for an aha moment, I'm sure either one of us could have tried to catch the superintendent at like a weird spot, like, how do I answer this question? But that wasn't the intention from the beginning. I'm glad that wasn't the approach, of course, that neither one of us were going to take. I think it was constructive. I think people had an opportunity to hear Now, whether or not you take everything what someone says as like the gospel, I mean, that's up to you, right, to discern. But at least you're hearing it from that individual, not through a media outlet, not through your friend's friend that thought they heard somebody else say something through. And so I'm happy that he came on. Hope that he does come back on. I think one of the things that I didn't get to talk to him about, especially when we talk about predominantly black and brown schools, but some of these underserved schools, is the impact of the PTA and PTO. I mean, I know that has a big impact with people, at least with me at my age, that are looking at sending their kids in. Some of us that were fortunate enough to go to higher rated schools had a better and more active and more functioning PTO and PTA. And I get the need to, cut some of the wraparound services, I guess, for budget purposes. I think they're super important, but if that's going to happen, there has to be a concerted effort to really make sure that the community is actively engaged, whether you have kids or not, like making sure that we're putting some of that onus back on the community. And so I wanted to talk to him about like how are you encouraging and engaging people, because there's some schools that we looked at, and I was like, oh, that PTA is not that active. I don't.
Yeah. Well, so here we had a couple of conversations with the superintendent in some meetings that I was privileged to be in, including conversations with him privately. And I do think that there is a role that churches need to play, that community-based organizations need to play in helping to mobilize parents and to get them more involved. But this issue of parental involvement is across the board. We deal with it at our preschool. Like, everybody wishes they could get the parents to come out. Right?
Yeah.
And usually you can't get parents to come out until there's a crisis, right? And then you may have parents come out. So, for example, when children were walking across the stage functionally illiterate and virtually unemployable, we didn't see all these folk out here. I'm telling you, I call the names of the people who were advocates, who were and activists who were out there fighting for these kids. And if they were listened to, including myself and the general, Jerry Monroe and others, if they were listened to, and HISD across the board, all of the board members actually cared about the kids who were east of Main Street, the whole takeover would have been staved off. They didn't do it. As a matter of fact, they had rolling meetings, illegal meetings, without the black representatives, scheming and strategizing. So it's not even that we didn't have good representation. I mean, man, Jolanda Jones is one of the smartest people I know. She could be off the chain, but man, the sister's passionate and she's smart as a whip, right? Kathy Bluford Daniels. And these are women who were committed to the cause of education, and others who were on the school board, right? But you can't do anything when you're outvoted. You can't do anything when you go into a meeting and you are facing a 6-3 deficit, even if you vote as a block, because those who are west of Main Street don't care about those who are east of Main Street.
Yeah.
And I think, listen, somebody needs to be open and honest. We have heard people talk about the districts being taken over for one school. And I've told people consistently, when you look at the rating of schools by children at risk, Phyllis Wheatley wasn't even the worst high school in HISD. It just happened to trigger House Bill 1842. It wasn't the worst rated high school in HISD. Kashmere High School went for, I think, 7 years and didn't have a certified math teacher in the building. This didn't start with Mike Miles, and let's stop acting like it started with him. It has been going on, and it went on with a duly democratically elected board in place. So let's stop acting like, oh, we're going to get the vote, put our board members back in, and things are going to change. Not for the people of color. Let's stop fooling ourselves.
Well, see, man, that's what's so interesting.
Because those 123 failing schools, I guarantee, they're not in West U.
No.
They're not in Memorial.
No.
Right? They're not in River Oaks. They're in black and brown communities.
I think that, man, what's interesting, and clearly there's been some pushback, and it's kind of me reading a little bit in between the lines, with what the superintendent was saying, right? Because he mentioned kind of twice where it's like, to be clear, I'm not trying to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it kind of goes to what you're saying, where it's like, clearly there is a...
And he's not taking from, and I guess when he says that, he's not taking from schools
right.
who are doing well
right.
to help other schools.
But that suggests that there's been commentary, or there is a perception that the only way, like he said, mentioned, is if everything's equal, you know what I mean? Hey, we're not doing anything wrong. But that doesn't make it equitable, specifically when you know that these schools are already, like, if we just equally did everything the same across the board, and
right,
you know
right.
we have 123 failing, it's never going to change. And like I said, having it, whether it's the structure of having specific representatives for different districts instead of everybody caring about the whole, I can see how someone can convince themselves easily, if we're making sure everybody has the same thing, then what harm is that, right? Everybody pulls themselves up by the bootstrap. I mean, you hear that. Yeah. Not trying to go too far to the political side of it, but you hear that idea that everybody's the same, right? You know?
Right.
And without looking at like kind of the bigger picture. And so I really think that some of those different initiatives are going to have to be done, because you can tell he's still kind of restrained, like, y'all, I'm not taking stuff away from these good schools. I promise I'm not going to make these schools bad. You're not going to have to. And the fact that that's even something that you have to address when you know that you have all these other schools that are considerably behind. It's unfortunate, but it's something that, look, if he can't do it, or if he's beholden, or whether it's law, you can't favor certain schools, blah, 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 we're going to have to do something as a community, whether it's the PTO, whether it's just general community members. Yeah. So you have to do something.
So I would agree, and I would say it's both and it's not either one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody said to me, all of these teacher layoffs, right? What's the deal? And my wife, Tori, for those of you who are listening, is a lifelong educator. I think she's a premier urban educator. I've said that even before we were married, right? But I've seen her walk into rooms and teach kids that others said were unteachable, right? But I said to her, as a great teacher, don't project your greatness on all teachers who are out there. Now, I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to come under some criticism. I know teacher union folk are going to criticize me. All teachers are not good teachers. Now, I've never heard any teacher say, I'm not a good teacher. In my whole life, I've never heard any teacher say, I'm not a good teacher. They blame the parents. They blame the kids. Always. Never heard anybody say, I'm not good. Now, it's not just for teachers. I never heard anybody in their profession say, you know what, man, I ain't worth a plug nickel.
Right. I'm just collecting a check.
Right. I ain't worth a dime. Right. I had a musician who said, man, Pastor, your choir can't sing. It's my second church. It was Freedom Baptist Church in Chester. He said, man, I love Butch. Butch going home to be with the Lord. Now, Butch said, man, Pastor, these folk just can't sing. They can't sing. I'm telling you, they can't sing. They just don't have it in them.
Yeah.
Brought in Brother Harry. Harry came in. Man, they sound like they was ready to record. After a week workshop, man, Harry had them folks singing. And as they were singing, I looked at Butch. And Butch looked at me, and Butch just shrugged his shoulders like, I don't know where this came from. Now, here's what we discovered. Butch couldn't get any more out of them.
Yeah.
We can't trade in the kids, right? And there's a whole lot of technical stuff going on with teachers. I talk to leaders and people. The people who are most vocal about these changes are the people who are great educators.
Yeah.
Right? The mediocre, piss poor teachers who are out there, who are just out there collecting a check, who are wilding out, right? Who are taking time off. There was a time, and those of you who have been around the district long enough, you know this, man, there was a time that principals and teachers, they went to retire and they had 2 years of sick time, 3 years of sick time, right? Now, man, these young teachers, hey, man, if they go to hear Bun B on Tuesday, they wilding out. We calling out sick on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's a different level of commitment. And when you have people who are submitting lesson plans through T-tests, and they're not teaching according to those lesson plans. And I know some of you are saying, well, how do you know they're not teaching according to the lesson plans? Because you're claiming that they mastered the skills, the kids have mastered the skills, you've moved on to the next subject matter, but it's not reflected in the testing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think that obviously the times have changed. You go to work 25 years, get your gold watch, and obviously that has changed. But I do agree, and I know the superintendent mentioned it, and I've said it a million times. We have to pay teachers more because part of the issue, and I sympathize with teachers because I know so many of them are drowning in just trying to find their footing, right? And when you're trying to get supplies and budget cuts, this, that, and third. So I get that. I also agree that on the professional tip with what you're saying, like there are varying degrees of people that are fantastic at teaching and meeting kids where they are. And that's just whether they're calling, they're just good at what they do. I think a lot of people, it's unfortunate, a lot of teachers probably haven't even had a chance to slow down and breathe enough because they got hit with a whirlwind from when they first came in. They haven't even thought about the concept of like, am I perfecting and honing my craft? And that's just from knowing some teachers, especially that were early in their career, they're just like, it was just a fire hose from day one, day two. I just made the summer, and then I swear I blinked and it was right back. But their love for their kids is there.
Right.
And that's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody, well, I'm sure there are some that hate their kids. But for the most part, they love their kids, but they're just not good at teaching. And I think it needs to be something, people need to be incentivized to be teachers in a manner because it's just too important for teachers to not be arguably the most important people in our society. I mean, it's too important.
Well, and I think that's why, I haven't heard any of those people criticizing Mike Miles, applauding him for the raise that NES school teachers have got.
Yeah.
Substantial bump. Like we're talking about like $20,000, right? I've heard people say privately, man, a bunch of people in the Hattie White building sitting around getting paid, not doing anything. Former Superintendent Miller House said, hey man, we're top heavy. He started moving people out of central office and said, y'all got to get back to the school. You got to get back in the classrooms. Y'all got to start teaching. We got a shortage out here. Y'all got to get back on the field, right? And people complained about it. But now when you're holding people accountable and people are being evaluated, I love the fact, I didn't know the extensiveness of the professional development.
Yeah.
Like you're meeting with people every month, that you're going in, you're doing spot evaluations, you're listening to what hey man, if a person's not doing their job, how long do you let them stay in that position? Because that's been a problem in the past in the district based on relationships and friendships. But it's not just the district. It's all over. People, man, hire their friends. They don't want to leave their friends. They don't want to lose their friends. I had a situation, and then we're going to get out of here. I had a situation where a school administrator kept moving a teacher around in the school, trying to find a place where they could get certified. Okay? Because they liked the person was really a nice person. And so they moved them from subject to subject, trying to find a place where this teacher could get certified. And I finally asked the person a question. I said, let me ask you a question. Would you want your grandchild in that person's classroom? Now, grandchildren and grandparents have a special bond. And that's in part because they share a common enemy, right? But when I said that to the person, they looked at me and said, I need to let her go. And I said, you do? And they said, but it's a tough job market out here. Where they going to work? And I said, you're an educator. You're not an employment agency. That's not your responsibility. Because at the end of the day, you're answering a question that you shouldn't be asking, right? as an educator, you don't ask the question, how do we keep somebody employed? You ask the question, what's in the best interest of our students? And some people will say, well, you know, if the teacher's happy, that's in the best interest of the student. Well, we need that person to be competent.
Yeah, I mean,
right? We need that person to move the needle academically. This is not a popularity contest. And we need that person to actually step up and help our students grow. We're requiring them in high school to read to learn, but these kids have never learned how to read in elementary and middle school, right? And so how do we make those shifts and make those changes? Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything that the superintendent has said. Here's what I am saying. Can't keep doing what we've been doing, the way we've been doing it, and expect different results. They call that insanity. Mm-hmm. So let's get ready to get out of here. You've been listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more. KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. Man, I know y'all got all kinds of ideas, and I know I see some of y'all talking about, man, he removed people, to his needs and not according to the needs of the students. I don't agree with that, Larry. I don't. Because these schools are failing, man. That's failing. And Larry, you know you my boy, man. I love you, man. But these schools are failing. And these teachers are not teaching. You are a committed teacher. There are committed teachers out there who give everything for their kids. But y'all got to admit, man, there's some teachers that are out there, man, that are not doing what's in the best interest of our kids. We'll see at the end of the day, right? You got the BOY, the MOY, the EOY, the beginning of year assessments, middle of year assessments, end of year assessments. We didn't get a chance to talk about some of those indicators, but we'll see. STAR results will be out in the next 30 days, 45 days or so. We'll find out if there's been any growth, if there's been any movement. And if there hasn't been any movement or we have regressed, I would gladly say, hey, man, we need another program. But until we see the data, I think we just need to hold our peace. All right? Listen, take care. We'll catch you next time on Real World, Real Talk on your member-supported public radio station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial.
Y'all showing out today.
From Jazz.
Hey, y'all. Man,